Good afternoon, and welcome to The Agenda, EqualityMaine's weekly live broadcast, where we bring you updates on our work in Maine and around the nation. If you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, feel free to use the chat function to let us know where you're watching from and what questions you have. An EqualityMaine staff member is monitoring that chat, and we'll make sure that those questions get to us here. My name is Jake Karras. My pronouns are he and him, and I'm the Grassroots Advocacy Coordinator here at EqualityMaine.
And my name is Marta Haydym. My pronouns are she and her, and I am the Community Outreach Coordinator. Unfortunately, this week we weren't able to have an ASL interpreter join us as we usually do. We definitely hope to have one back with us next week. And in the meantime, you can use captions on Facebook Live. So now I'm going to pass it back to Jake for a political update.
Thanks, Rose. So before we get to the topic of today's show, there's been a lot of interesting developments in Washington and around the nation that impact the LGBTQ community. So the first one is some good news, and that is yesterday the Senate voted 52-48 to confirm Dr. Rachel Levine to the position of Assistant Secretary of Health. Dr. Levine is now the highest ranking transgender official in the federal government as the Assistant Secretary of Health. She has published numerous papers on opioid response, marijuana, adolescent health, although I imagine a lot of her time in the coming months is going to be spent on responding to the COVID-19 pandemic. So we're certainly glad to see members of our community represented in the administration. A bigger story, and one that I don't think has been getting a whole lot of coverage, but is certainly very interesting, is what's happening right now in South Dakota. So conservatives are really in disarray after South Dakota's Republican Governor Kristi Noem issued a partial veto on the anti-trans legislation pending in the state there. So in a move that made pretty much everybody really upset, the governor issued only a partial veto on HB 1217, which was an effort to prohibit trans girls from playing school sports. She returned the bill to the legislature in what's called a style and form veto, meaning that she supports the intent of the legislation, but she had a couple of issues with its drafting that posed particular challenges for her as the governor. She thought, and I believe correctly, that she would be facing legal challenges over the law as it was written, that there was a risk for the NCAA pulling out of possible tournaments in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, as well as concerns from the local chambers of commerce and over Amazon, who's planning new development in the state. Now, this is not without precedent in the past, too. In North Carolina, after HB 2, the so-called bathroom bill, passed, some estimates figured that the state lost over $500 million of economic activity following the anti-transgender legislation passed due to the NCAA pulling out and businesses opposing it as well. So that's certainly weighing on the governor's mind. In an effort to try to control the damage, Governor Noem appeared on Tucker Carlson Tonight, and she was sharply criticized for caving to the NCAA and, quote, woke capitalism. So we'll certainly be monitoring what happens in the coming weeks out of South Dakota. But to clarify, this is not a simple win for the LGBTQ community because of the veto. Noem, of course, is still an emphatic supporter of this type of legislation, and her office has repeatedly ignored requests by transgender advocacy groups to meet with her so that they could voice their concerns. So we'll be keeping you updated on developments of anti-trans legislation in the coming weeks as well. And I'll turn it back to Rose.
Thanks, Jake. So this week we have Marta Haydym joining us. And Marta, we're so grateful that you can be here with us. Hello. Marta is a financial planner, and she also works with me as part of the Queer Network's planning team. So for today's episode, we wanted to take some time to talk about what is the Queer Network and what we've been up to. So the Queer Network is our new programming for younger adults, which was kind of just getting off the ground when the pandemic hit. We were able to offer an in-person networking event last year in partnership with Candies, and since then we've had to pivot to virtual programming, and we really hope that we can pivot again to a more hybrid programming soon. So our goal is really to help younger adults in our community engage with EqualityMaine's work and connect with each other, because while LGBTQ youth can attend the New Leaders Project and students may have access to the kind of structured opportunities to build community and to be part of community, once they join the workforce, younger adults can have a harder time finding queer community and building queer affirming networks. And so we really wanted to make a community space that's not centered around nightlife or dating, but just around connecting with people socially and professionally. So Marta, hi, thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
So I wanted to start by talking a little bit about the event that happened last week. The network put together this multi-generational event that was marking the anniversary of COVID. So Marta, could you start off by just talking, what the goal of that was and what made it so rewarding?
So I think the goal of that event specifically was to, make a space for people who don't typically get to talk to one another. So like it was a lot of people from, people in their 20s, 30s, 40s, people in their 60s, 70s, 80s. And, unless they're your parent or your grandparent, you don't tend to meet people who are decades older than you, especially, queer older people, because it's, the specific example I'm thinking about was, there was this fantastic older woman I met, and she just poses the best questions I've ever heard. And of course, as soon as that event ended, I asked, I asked Rose for her email because she was just so cool. I just want to be friends with her. And I never would have had the opportunity to meet her if I hadn't gone to that. And I think that's what the whole goal of that is.
That's great. I think one thing that is so important about here is that for the LGBTQ community, there's never a built-in connection between the younger and the older generation. And that's twofold, which is one, of course, younger people don't always have, a lesbian grandmother to speak to. And second, the older generation largely isn't here due to, a lot of factors that a lot of older adults died younger than their heterosexual or their cisgender counterparts. So it's awesome to see you working to really bridge that gap.
Yeah, and it's something like I hope we continue to do more intergenerational events because they've been some of my favorite things I've been able to do with the queer network so far. And they're so growing up a poor Ukrainian immigrant that didn't even know gay people existed. I was told that gay Ukrainians don't exist. And, realizing that they did in high school and actually meeting people who are gay Ukrainians completely changed my life. And I hope that by doing events like this, we can have a space for people who are also told that blank doesn't exist. And then they actually get to meet someone who they do exist and they've had a successful life and they've had a loving partner and they've, had everything I never thought I'd be able to have.
Marta, I'm going to make a note of that, of the experience of LGBTQ immigrants, because of course you bring your experience of somebody who immigrated from Eastern Europe, and of course here my neighbors next door are almost entirely from West Africa, and I know there's certain members of the LGBTQ community that chose Portland and chose Maine because it's a really good environment for our community. But Rose, I'll let you speak further on this.
Yeah, thank you. I was also at the intergenerational event helping out with that last week, and just really wanted to echo what Marta was saying, that I think a big part of what we're doing with the Queer Network is hoping to foster these peer connections so that people who are at similar stages in their, kind of a beginning point in their career or just in their working life can connect with each other. That's really valuable. And also making those connections with SAGE or with the new leaders with folks at different ages is also really meaningful. And Marta, I think you just spoke to this a little bit already, but a big part of why I asked you to be on the show this week is because you've been involved with the Queer Network since we really started planning it, since before I even worked at EqualityMaine myself. And so I'm wondering if you can say a little bit more about what made you want to get involved with this project.
Yeah, so, pretty early on in my career, I realized that, as a financial advisor, my clients ask me for referrals for things you can't even imagine. Because I'm not just a financial advisor, I tend to be a therapist, so I hear about every aspect of people's lives. So I wanted to refer to people who are like me. there are a bunch of people who own businesses that are white and straight, and that's fantastic. There's nothing wrong with that. But it's just like there are other business owners that look like you and they will send you business. There aren't too many people who are, young lesbians in our industry, especially who like have different backgrounds and who aren't from Maine. And, all those things, I kept running into issues and I was like, I don't want to send my clients to you. I don't like the way you do your business, or, what, you're great, but your business is doing great. Like, you don't need referrals from me. Like you get business from other people who look like you. You don't need me. So it was really important for me to find other professionals who had their own small businesses who I could send clients to. And like, for example, one of my favorite clients is trans. So, I have several accountants I work with, but one of the accountants I work with is also trans, and they just really hit it off. And that gave both of them the ability to have conversations about things that I can't comment on because I'm not trans. Like, that's something I can't connect with. Like, making that connection, I hope that that's like a connection they'll be able to have for the rest of their life. And, having somebody who you trust to do your taxes and to ask questions and to deal with finance who understands you can make a huge difference in your life. So that's just one example. I refer to the queer estate attorney too. I refer to queer construction people. Like, every opportunity I can get to expand that network, I do. And I know we have on the EqualityMaine website, we have a list running of queer businesses in the state of Maine. So I highly encourage everyone to check that out and, support what you can. Support the kind of businesses that you want to see growing. So if you want to see more queer business owners, support more queer businesses.
Yeah, thank you, Marta. And that link should be coming up in the chat. And that's definitely a great example of the kind of project that we'd like to be working on with the Queer Network. We have really focused on our virtual events, but building up the queer-owned business list has also been something that we worked on, definitely in large part thanks to you, Marta, and thanks to also all of the community members who've sent me more information and more ideas for that list.
Yeah, please, if you are a queer business owner, or a queer business owner, just tell us their name, just so we can add in, keep that list ever growing, because I try to grow it on my own and I ask people for like connections, but after a while my circle ran out and like all the connections I was getting were from Southern Maine, and there's no way that gay people don't exist in Northern Maine. Do not try to tell someone that, because I know that that's not true.
Yeah, and I think that it's been a really great thing about, well, it's been kind of a silver lining to doing our program virtually over the pandemic, that we've been able to connect with people really across the state in a way that we didn't necessarily think we'd be able to when the Queer Network was first getting started. As I mentioned earlier,
like in the past year that we've been operating, through COVID, I thought that we stopped doing a lot of the stuff we were doing, but the events we've come up with have just surpassed all my expectations, and I'm really pleased to see like what this is growing into. And I, can't wait to see in 5 years what it looks like, and in 10 years what it looks like. And I hope that it'll outlive all of us, honestly.
Yeah, I hope so too.
Yeah, when I'm too old and decrepit to be a part of it, pass it on to the youngins. When
you're a Sage member.
Can't wait. Sage members are cool. Like, I've met most, like they're pretty cool. I can't wait.
So as I mentioned earlier, we do hope that we'll be able to start hybrid programming soon, as it becomes safer to have smaller in-person gatherings. And Marta, I'm kind of putting you on the spot here, but just wondering if you have any hopes for the future of the Queer Network that you want to get more into.
Oh, I do. I really can't wait till we can start doing more in-person events. And like, I really want to do especially more physical events. So like, I'd really like if we like came up with like a queer hiking group. I know like that exists to some aspect, but like that's something I've been looking for that I'm unable to find. So if you can't find it, make it, is my life motto. And just, I really wanted to become just more of what it is and have more people find out about it, and just continue seeing that growth because it is doing cool things. And I can't wait to see what else we continue to do.
Yeah. So the events that we do have on our calendar coming up on April 13th, we are going to be partnering with the Curtis Memorial Library in Brunswick. And they're hosting a screening of the film Fire and Flood, Queer Resilience in the Era of Climate Crisis. And we will be hosting a panel discussion of 4 queer Mainers who will talk about their work and the issues of environmental justice and LGBTQ issues. And so the registration for that will be live soon, so keep an eye out on our social media. And then our next Queer Network specific event will be in May. We'll be hosting family lawyer Janine Oliega and Dr. Ben Lannon to talk about LGBTQ family planning and fertility preservation.
Very excited about that one.
We're really excited for
more excited.
Yeah, so we're really excited to be, especially to be partnering with other organizations and with other people. So we're always happy to do that if folks have an interest in presenting on something that seems relevant for our target audience. We're just always happy to get more ideas, get more people on our planning team, or just get more people on our email list. So if you are interested in attending or in helping out with future events, please don't hesitate to reach out. And my email address should be in the chat too.
I'll just say before we close out, I just think the whole effort's super cool to build some kind of way for young LGBTQ people to meet each other that's not around just nightlife. When we spoke to Shane Diamond about his tobacco use and his experience as like a young queer person here in Portland, so much of meeting people is mediated through nightlife, through alcohol, through being out at midnight and later. And for a lot of people, and to some extent I include myself in that, that's just really not appealing, even if there weren't a pandemic. So it's just really refreshing to hear that people want to hear about financial planning, or if we want to go hiking, because I went to the Whites last spring by myself and it's a little scary all alone.
Yeah, and like Jake, you're hitting on a huge trend. I mean, we're seeing bars pop up now that don't serve alcohol. Like they're completely dry bars because people aren't interested, especially when you get into your 30s, 40s. It just, getting hungover the next morning isn't fun. So I really enjoy stuff like this because I also don't like going out at 1 a.m. and getting to experience the Portland nightlife. Let's just put it that way. So I hope we can continue doing events more like cooking class oriented or hiking oriented, or things you have to deal with as an adult oriented, so we can continue to make those connections without having to rely on drugs, alcohol, and tobacco.
Well, thank you, Jake, for making that tie-in. And Marta, thank you so much for being here. And thank you for all that you're doing for the Queer Network.
Awesome. That about wraps up the agenda for this week. Marta Haydym is a financial advisor at Edward Jones. I'm super glad to have her join us. Once again, I'm Jake, joined here by Rose. And that's all for the agenda for this week. Thank you so much for watching.